I've always liked déjà vu, which is, I think is like, sort of like sotto voce in Italian or something, but surely enough people know it. I love the title, but then you did Death du Jour, so you're using the same...
The first 5 books all were English-French jeu de mots, play on words.
Décision.
Deadly decisions. Again, it had to be easily understood, but it's décision is the same in French, and there's a little accent there, which most English readers don't even notice.
No, they don't, but Scribner's just thoughtfully put the accent aigu, or the, as I say, the uptick accent on décision.
Fatal voyage is the same fatal voyage, or in French it would actually be voyage fatal.
Right.
And grave secret is grave secrets. So up until that
without
point,
the S.
Yes.
Sorry, I've been studying French for 28 years, so actually longer now.
It was hard by that time. It was hard finding them that were clever.
Well, it is, no, you know what, and for some reason, I'm ashamed of myself. I never really picked up on, voyage fatal or,
Now, Bare Bones was set entirely in Charlotte and had no Montreal connection at all. So that's where we broke with that.
And then Monday morning, there's a double entendre there because morning is in M-O-U-R-N, not daytime morning.
And that's a play on words, but only in English.
Right.
At that point, we abandoned the...
And Crossbones?
By Crossbones, Bones was on the air.
Aha.
So Bones, we wanted to have Bones in every title, and from that point on, we had Crossbones, Break No Bones, Bones to Ashes.
And whatever you're working on now.
Devil Bones.
What is it?
Devil Bones.
Devil
That's
Bones.
Our working.
Ooh, that sounds very nice. So you had the triple Ds, or rather you had the D words for the first 3 books, and then we were doing the French thing, and that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the bones.
Yeah. It's sort of, they're trying to get some mileage out of the TV show, which is in our 3rd season, so.
There's a lesson to me. Sometimes the most obvious stuff just fails to whack you over the head, doesn't it? Well, anyway, Death du Jour, was that the cult?
Yes, there were a couple of things that gave rise to that book. I did a case in the mid-90s for the Catholic Church, in which I exhumed the remains of a woman who died in 1714 and is now proposed for sainthood. We also did at our lab the autopsies for the Order of the Solar Temple mass murder suicide group. So I was thinking along religious lines and cult lines, and all of that was floating around in my head. So those are the kind, not that I'm equating the Catholic Church with a cult, but those were the themes that...
Gotcha. What about Deadly Decisions?
Deadly Decisions. We had a very active biker war going in Quebec province throughout the 90s, and for a place with a low homicide rate, it was a rough ride. And a lot of those boys ended up in my lab. So Deadly Decisions is based on the bikers, the Hells Angels biker war.
I was interested when I read it, remembering back about, that they were basically kind of a UPS of the drug trade. And I mean,
well, and also the Hells Angels in Quebec were kind of specialists in murder.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I hadn't thought about, the fact that this highly mobile group, like a Hells Angels group, could do a lot of transport of illegal substances as well as, strike and run away. It's
organized crime. It's very sophisticated organized crime. They're not just bad boys running around on Harleys anymore. It's millions and millions of dollars organized crime.
Absolutely.
And drugs figure very prominently.
But there's also a large recreational component, so it's kind of difficult to distinguish between the people who are out there riding around, for the fun of it.
A lot of them riding around now in Ferraris and things. So.
Aha. No, but I mean, I was thinking, I remember in Eastern Canada how many people we saw who were, riding motorcycles clearly as a recreational activity, not because, they didn't have all the obvious emblems. I mean, don't the guys that belong to the actual motorcycle groups, aren't they really big on identification?
There are bikers and there are outlaw bikers.
Oh, okay.
So we make it very clear that we're talking about the what do they call themselves, the 1%ers, the outlaw bikers.
Okay. And then Fatal Voyage was what?
Fatal Voyage reflects my work with the DMORT teams, the Disaster Mortuary Operational Response teams. And it was kind of ironic. I spent the years of, 99 and 2000 writing it, or 99 writing it. In 2000 it was in production. It came out in August of 2001. And in it, it starts with the crash of a commercial airliner.
Right.
And Tempe goes with her DMORT, is deployed to the scene to help recover and identify the victims. So you learn a lot about how disaster recovery work takes place. And then ironically, 1 month after that came out, I ended up being deployed with more to ground zero, 9/11. I mainly worked at the Staten Island at the landfill.
That was a really scary sequence, wasn't it? I mean, it was almost as though you were pressing it, writing the novel.
Yeah, yeah.
And the timing for your publishing it actually turned out to be a good thing.
Fortunately, it came out before.
Exactly, because it would have been very tough to bring out a book like that afterward. No, there are a lot of people. I just read a book by a really lovely guy, a Brooklyn writer, and it's taken him from 2001 to today to figure out how to write about what he was writing about when 9/11 happened. So you might never have really been able to write or finish that book if it had come along.
I go from here back to Charlotte, but then I go up to New York for some more promotion. I'll be flying home from New York on 9/11, so.
Ooh.
Gives you pause.
Well, if you read today's headlines in the paper about the various European groups they have, discovered were gearing up for some sort of anniversary thing.
Great.
But I think they were striking in Europe. I mean, they were not targeting the U.S. so much as targeting a U.S. presence in Germany and somewhere else. And that's another whole side. Daniel Silva and I had a really very interesting conversation when he was here in July about Europe as the, really the primary target at this stage. Easier access, dense population, a lot of things going on. Well, moving along, Grave Secrets, was that?
Grave Secrets reflects human rights work. Anthropologists are quite involved in the exhumation of mass graves in Serbia and you name it, Argentina, Nicaragua. Mine experience, I testified on the genocide tribunal for Rwanda. This book draws on experience I had in Guatemala, exhuming a mass grave of some of the victims of the Civil War down there.
Has anybody done any of that work in Cambodia? The Khmer Rouge and whatever?
Yes, I think, I'm not positive. I think there may be someone active in Cambodia. I know our military JPAC out in Hawaii is very active in Southeast Asia, trying to recover our war dead from Southeast Asia, as well as Korea and World War II, but I'm not sure about Cambodia.
I don't know that they'd invite people in to, check it out. I did know that the Army was very active, or the military services, probably more than the Army, were very actively trying to recover any American remains and identify them.
Anywhere. We have a commitment to any soldier that we will bring you home.
Right.
So it's called the Joint POW and Missing in Action, JPAC, Joint POW Missing in Action Committee, I think. And they employ I think they're up to about 30 full-time anthropologists now out at Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii.
There's a man named Tom Holland who's written some kind of a book, and isn't he a director or something along these lines? Yes, he's the director of the scientific side. Okay.
He's a forensic anthropologist.
Right, and he's got a new book coming out, I think, called KIA, presumably Killed in Action, the acronym therefore. And I think it's coming out in January. It was supposed to be out this fall, but I just happened to look. He wrote one called One Drop of Blood.
One Drop of Blood, yeah.
And I thought that he was doing a little bit of what you're doing, but in a much more specific environment.
Well, he's full-time. He does that full-time. Anytime there's a positive identification of a serviceman or woman, it has to be reviewed by a number of levels of review committees, including an external review. So they use somewhere around 6 external reviewers, and it's one of the things that had to go. I can't do that any longer, but I did that for them for several years, reviewing everything you would receive, the flight plan and the dental records and the medical records and the history, everything about the death or the disappearance of that particular serviceman. And then I would read through the entire dossier and see if the identification seemed justified. And then twice a year we would go out to the lab, and because they're in Hawaii and they're quite anxious for contact, and we would just interact with the full-time anthropologists and dentists out there and give them input.
Well, I think I did read One Drop of Blood, and I think he did his best to tie it to the actual work that he does. And I find that kind of as a lawyer, I find that kind of interesting, and to what degree can you do that? I mean, perhaps there is no barrier at all,